Kareem Al-Nasir had everything money could buy. Sofia Marquez-Al-Nasir had everything the world admired. Daniel Mercer had access to everything that could destroy them both. Within 48 hours, a £480 million transfer would freeze a billionaire's empire, trigger a British High Court detention in London, and expose a financial maze stretching from Dubai to Manila. What looked like a desperate move to hide wealth would soon unravel into a chilling question. Was this a calculated escape plan, or the first sign of betrayal from inside the inner circle? This is the story of power, panic, and a single transaction that pushed 3 lives into the center of an international legal storm. On a gray winter morning in London, the runway lights at Heathrow Airport reflected off a sleek private jet that had just arrived from Dubai. The aircraft carried one of the Middle East's most recognizable billionaires, Kareem Al-Nasir, a man whose fortune was built on glittering skyscrapers, luxury resorts, and high-profile international investments. He was known for hosting lavish events attended by royalty and celebrities. Financial magazines often described him as a visionary who turned desert land into symbols of modern wealth. Few people at the airport that morning expected anything unusual. As Kareem stepped down from the jet, dressed in a tailored dark coat and sunglasses, he appeared calm and confident. But within seconds, several British officers approached him. Their movements were coordinated and deliberate. They handed him official documents from a British High Court judge. The order stated that he was to be detained for questioning and that his assets within the United Kingdom were frozen immediately. His passport was temporarily seized. The sudden action drew attention from airport staff and a handful of passengers watching from nearby windows. News of the detention spread quickly. By the afternoon, headlines across Europe were reporting that a Dubai billionaire had been stopped in Britain over a massive financial transfer. The figure being discussed was staggering, nearly £480 million. The money had been moved from a London-based holding company connected to Kareem's real estate empire into a private account belonging to his Filipina wife, Sofia Marquez-Al-Nasir. Sofia was widely known in lifestyle circles. Originally from Manila, she had once worked as a fashion model before marrying Kareem in a ceremony that filled society pages. Photos of their wedding in Dubai showed golden decorations, rare flowers flown in from Europe, and a guest list of influential business leaders. She rarely spoke publicly about financial matters and was seen as distant from corporate decision-making. That made the transfer even more surprising. British authorities believed the timing of the transaction was suspicious. The transfer had taken place only 2 days before several international investors filed complaints in the UK claiming that promised returns from a luxury development project had not been paid. Those investors alleged that tens of millions were unaccounted for. Investigators suspected the funds had been shifted to avoid potential seizure or legal claims. As financial regulators examined the documents, they noticed the transfer had been processed with unusual speed. Internal approvals were signed within hours. The movement of such a large amount would normally require extended oversight, yet this transaction appeared almost urgent. That urgency became a central focus of the investigation. Kareem was escorted from the runway into a waiting vehicle. Cameras soon gathered outside the airport. The image of a billionaire being led away under court authority shocked the public. For years, he had symbolized success and expansion. Now, he faced intense scrutiny inside a British legal system known for its strict financial regulations. Behind the flashing cameras and official statements, one question dominated the unfolding crisis. Why would nearly £500 million suddenly be transferred to his wife just before investors raised alarms? The answer would pull investigators into a web of hidden accounts, shifting loyalties, and a legal battle that would stretch across continents. Investigators in London wasted no time after the detention order was issued. Financial crime specialists began reviewing thousands of documents connected to Kareem Al-Nasir's British companies. What they found was not simple. His empire was built through a network of holding firms, offshore partnerships, and layered investment vehicles registered across Europe, the Caribbean, and parts of Asia. Each company appeared legitimate on its own, but together they formed a maze that was difficult to follow. The £480 million transfer to Sofia Marquez-Al-Nasir stood at the center of the inquiry. The money had moved from a London-based real estate holding firm into her personal account in a single coordinated transaction. Banking officials confirmed that all compliance checks had been technically satisfied, yet the speed and timing remained unusual. The transfer was finalized just 48 hours before formal investor complaints were submitted to the High Court. Those investor complaints involved a luxury coastal development project in southern Europe. The project had been advertised as an exclusive destination featuring private villas, a marina, and a high-end hotel. Promotional material promised strong returns within 3 years. However, construction had stalled months earlier. Investors claimed they had received little explanation and no updated financial reports. When forensic accountants traced the original investment funds, gaps began to appear. Payments made by investors did not fully match expenditures recorded by the development company. Millions seemed to have been redirected through consulting fees and management charges. Some of those fees eventually circled back to accounts associated with Kareem's broader business network. Attention then shifted to Sofia's account. Authorities expected the money to remain untouched while the legal situation unfolded. Instead, within days of receiving the funds, large portions were transferred again. Significant amounts were wired to private trusts registered in Singapore and Switzerland. Other portions were placed into structured asset protection vehicles managed by international legal advisors. Sofia's legal team insisted that she had no active role in business decisions. They described the transfer as a lawful marital allocation of assets. According to filings submitted to the court, Kareem had chosen to reorganize family wealth as part of long-term estate planning. However, investigators uncovered internal emails that complicated that explanation. Digital signatures showed Sofia had approved certain restructuring documents weeks before the major transfer. Her name appeared on at least 3 corporate resolutions authorizing changes in company ownership structures. While these actions were not illegal on their own, they suggested awareness of financial shifts happening inside the empire. Bank analysts also noted that the redistributed funds were broken into carefully calculated amounts. Each portion fell below automatic international reporting thresholds, even though the total remained enormous. That pattern raised suspicions that someone had designed the transfers to reduce immediate scrutiny. The High Court responded by expanding the asset freeze. Additional properties in the United Kingdom were restricted from sale or refinancing. Travel limitations were tightened for both Kareem and Sofia, while investigators continued reviewing digital records. As authorities believed they were closing in on clarity, another development disrupted the case. A senior executive closely connected to the financial structure abruptly disappeared, leaving behind unanswered questions. The investigation was no longer focused solely on a billionaire and his wife. It was evolving into something far more complex and unpredictable. The disappearance of Daniel Mercer changed the direction of the investigation almost overnight. Mercer had served as Kareem Al-Nasir's chief financial strategist in London for nearly 7 years. He was not a public figure, but inside the company he was known as the architect of its international structure. He handled offshore registrations, tax strategies, and cross-border transfers. Many of the financial pathways investigators were now examining had originally been designed by him. 2 weeks before Kareem's detention at Heathrow Airport, Mercer had quietly resigned. According to company records, he cited personal reasons and submitted a brief exit memo. Security footage from the corporate office showed him leaving late one evening with only a small briefcase. He never returned. When British authorities visited his home in Surrey, they found it nearly empty. Furniture had been removed, personal belongings were gone, and his mobile phone was switched off. Neighbors reported seeing moving trucks days earlier but thought nothing of it at the time. Passport control records later revealed that Mercer had boarded an international flight from London using his own name. After that, the trail became unclear. Financial analysts began reviewing payments connected to Mercer in the months leading up to the transfer to Sofia Marquez-Al-Nasir. They discovered unusually large performance bonuses categorized as consulting incentives. These bonuses were authorized internally and appeared valid, but their timing raised suspicion. Several were issued shortly before the £480 million transfer was executed. Further examination revealed that Mercer had access to the same accounts from which the funds were drawn. As chief strategist, he had the authority to prepare transaction documents and coordinate with external banking institutions. Although final approvals required senior authorization, Mercer's position allowed him to structure transfers in advance. Investigators also traced indirect links between Mercer's professional network and certain shell companies that later received portions of Sofia's redistributed funds. While there was no direct proof that he controlled those entities, registration documents showed shared service providers and overlapping administrative contacts. This new information forced prosecutors to reconsider their theory. Initially, they believed Kareem had orchestrated the transfer to protect assets from investor claims. Now another possibility emerged. If Mercer had manipulated internal financial records, he might have triggered investor panic to create an opportunity for diversion. The staged complaints could have been part of a larger strategy. Public opinion began to shift as media outlets reported the executive's disappearance. Some questioned whether the billionaire was truly the mastermind or whether he had been betrayed from within. Others argued that even if Mercer played a role, the responsibility ultimately rested with the company's leadership. The complexity deepened when investigators uncovered that certain investor complaint documents contained inconsistencies in formatting and signature placement. Early forensic reviews suggested that not all paperwork had been completed in the same manner. That discovery introduced a troubling possibility. Parts of the legal crisis may have been artificially created. As the search for Mercer expanded beyond the United Kingdom, authorities faced a critical question. Was he fleeing from exposure, or was he executing the final phase of a carefully planned financial operation? The case entered a new and dangerous phase as British legal authorities began to question the foundation of the investigation itself. In London, handwriting specialists and forensic document analysts were asked to review the original investor complaints that had triggered the High Court's intervention. What they found caused immediate concern. Several signatures on key agreements did not match verified samples provided by the investors. Ink patterns and digital timestamps suggested that at least 2 documents had been assembled from multiple sources rather than signed in full at one time. This discovery threatened to undermine the entire legal basis for freezing Kareem Al-Nasir's assets. If the complaints were partially fabricated, the court's emergency actions could be challenged. Prosecutors shifted focus toward the origin of the paperwork. Attention soon fell on a small legal consultancy firm operating out of central London, hired to prepare filings on behalf of the investors. On paper, the firm appeared legitimate, but its financial history showed irregular billing practices and short-term contracts that raised suspicion. Background checks revealed a troubling connection. The firm's director had previously worked as an external advisor on projects linked to Daniel Mercer years earlier. While no direct evidence tied the firm to forgery, the overlap in professional history was impossible to ignore. Investigators began to suspect that Mercer may have used third parties to manufacture legal pressure, knowing it would force rapid reactions inside Kareem's companies. At the same time, the controversial transfer to Sofia Marquez-Al-Nasir remained unresolved. Court-appointed financial experts analyzed the structure of the transaction in detail. Their report concluded that the transfer closely resembled a protective marital settlement, commonly used to safeguard family assets during periods of legal uncertainty. What made it unusual was that no divorce proceedings existed. The arrangement appeared preemptive, designed to shield funds before any formal action could fully unfold. This raised a critical question. Had Kareem anticipated an internal threat rather than an external one? Internal audit documents showed that weeks before his arrest, concerns had been raised about discrepancies in consulting fees and account authorizations. Those warnings pointed toward Mercer's department. The timing suggested that Kareem may have acted out of fear that funds under Mercer's control were at risk. The British, months into the investigation, when public interest had begun to fade, a breakthrough quietly shifted the entire case. Digital forensic teams in London recovered encrypted data from a remote backup server linked to Daniel Mercer's former office. The server had not been wiped completely. Hidden within archived folders were compressed files protected by advanced encryption. After weeks of technical analysis, cyber specialists managed to unlock the contents. Inside were draft contracts, strategic notes, and financial projections outlining a plan that closely matched the chaos unfolding in court. The documents described a staged investor dispute designed to trigger regulatory panic. The strategy involved filing aggressive complaints, freezing assets, and creating confusion inside corporate structures. During that instability, funds could be redirected through controlled pathways before authorities fully understood what was happening. One detail stood out immediately. The original plan did not include the emergency transfer to Sofia Marquez-Al-Nasir. In fact, internal notes indicated frustration about unexpected defensive restructuring that disrupted the timing of the operation. Investigators interpreted this as evidence that Kareem Al-Nasir had moved the money after discovering irregularities within his own financial department. Further examination of internal audit reports supported this conclusion. Weeks before his detention at Heathrow Airport, Kareem had authorized a quiet compliance review. That review flagged unusual bonus payments and unexplained consultancy fees tied to Mercer's oversight. The £480 million transfer now appeared less like an attempt to hide funds from investors and more like an effort to secure capital away from accounts Mercer influenced. Attention then turned to the redistributed funds under Sofia's name. Forensic accountants traced each transaction through trusts and holding entities. While the structure appeared complex, the money ultimately remained within regulated financial systems. No evidence showed personal spending beyond asset management costs. The transfers aligned with legal asset protection frameworks often used by high-net-worth families facing litigation risks. International cooperation intensified. Authorities tracked Mercer's movements through Southeast Asia. After months of searching, Interpol confirmed his detention under a false identity in a regional financial hub. Digital evidence seized during that arrest reportedly matched the planning documents found in London. The British court re-evaluated its position. While Kareem's decision to move such a large sum raised legitimate concerns, the emerging evidence suggested he had reacted to internal betrayal rather than orchestrated fraud. Judges lifted the strictest travel restrictions but imposed ongoing financial monitoring to ensure transparency. Sofia was formally cleared of criminal wrongdoing after investigators concluded she had not personally benefited from the transfer. The protective restructuring, though aggressive, fell within legal boundaries. Despite legal relief, the damage was lasting. In Dubai, investors remained cautious. Regulatory bodies introduced stricter oversight for cross-border transactions. Kareem's empire survived, but its image of invincibility was permanently weakened.